Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I know it's been quite a while, but I'm back, and in today's video I am going to show you how I sculpted my OC wearing this cute little get-up costume using Nomad Sculpt. If you've been following me for a while, you probably know that I've mentioned that I would like to one day create art toys of my little OCs, but to do that I need to get a little proficient in 3D modeling and sculpting. I am by no means a Nomad Sculpt expert whatsoever, but I do feel comfortable enough to at least share the basics of what I know. I've also had a few people reach out to me to express how cool they think 3D modeling is, but also are a little intimidated by it, and I have always felt that way, and I still feel that way sometimes. So I kind of wanted to create this video to, again, show off the basics and basically reveal that, sculpting or 3D sculpting isn't as scary as we think it is. And once you at least know the basics of an application, you can kind of just run wild. So today, just think of this video as my unofficial guide and tutorial on Nomad Sculpt. Essentially, I will be cosplaying as a teacher, as if I know what I'm talking about. So please bear with me. Take what you hear from me with a grain of salt. If there's anything that I might have said that might not be totally correct, feel free to let me know in the comments, and also feel free to share any tips that made Nomad Sculpt easier for you to use. Okay, so with introductions out of the way, I think I'm ready to start. So as mentioned, I'm going to be sculpting my OC Sagu dressed up in this get-up costume. This design is based off of a sticker that I recently designed prior to this. That is part of a tropical fruit sticker pack collection that will be available in my shop when it opens, whenever that will be. I really enjoyed how all three turned out, but because I think Sagu is my favorite character out of the bunch and is the face of my brand, I wanted to use her design as practice to kind of exercise those 3D modeling muscles. And also, if you didn't know, I actually don't know too many people who know what genup is, but it's a tropical fruit that is found in the Caribbean and South America. I grew up eating it because my mom is from the Caribbean, so the only people I know who have actually tried it are family members of mine. So let me know if you've ever had it before. It's been so long since I've actually eaten one, I don't even know if I remember the taste. I think I remember them being like sour and sweet at the same time. They just look like little tiny mangoes to me, but I am actually going to Anguilla this summer for a family reunion, so I will be reunited with my sweet and sour fruit soon. So anyway, again, let me know if you've ever had it before. I'd be curious to find that out. Okay, before we officially begin, I just need to share a few specifications. I'm using Nomad Sculpt on an iPad Pro Mini. However, I believe you can use whatever iPad you have available as long as it supports iPad OS 15 or higher. And if you don't already have Nomad Sculpt, you can purchase it from the App Store for about $19.99. And it's a one-time purchase, so you don't have to worry about any recurring subscriptions. Okay, time to get into it. So when you first open Nomad Sculpt, you're going to be met with a digital sphere. That is the default shape that comes with the application. And in this part of the video, I'm just going to go over some of the basic tools and functions that I essentially use to sculpt my figure, just so you'll have at least a little bit of an understanding as I move along with the sculpting. So for starters, when you look at your interface, over in the top left-hand corner is going to be your top menu, and the icon that I'm hovering over is called Project. In this section of the top menu, this is where you can start a new file, save your file, open up an old one, or even delete a file if you need to. There are some export options too listed below, but we'll go over that later at the end of the video. Next is the scene menu, and this is where all of your objects are going to essentially live. Think of it as almost like your layers in Photoshop or Procreate, and here you'll be able to add an object, delete it, you can lock your layers. So I'm just going to add like a dummy sphere just as an example. So once you add it, it'll appear in your scene, and then let's say you want to get rid of it, you'll click those three little dots right there and then press delete. You'll find other useful functions that can help aid in your sculpting. For example, repeaters is super useful. I love the mirror function and the radial function. Those really come in handy. The mirror function is definitely a function that I use quite frequently. Next, we have the multi-resolution icon or typology icon, and the main thing you need to know here is the voxel section or voxel remeshing section. So what voxel remeshing does is it just essentially makes your primitive object more of a higher resolution so that you can create more details as you sculpt. And I am just going off what the Nomad Sculpt manual says here, but it essentially allows your mesh to have a more uniform topology, and it's just more essential if you want to do more like freeform sculpting. Again, not my words, words taken from the manual. But it's really simple to use. You just adjust the slider to the resolution that you want and then select remesh. Although it's always recommended not to go too high, because the higher you go, it can just cause the application and your iPad to work a little harder because the resolution is so high. Okay, next we have the materials icon, but I'll be honest, I don't fiddle with this menu too often, so we're actually just gonna skip over this one and head over to the next one. Which brings us to our lighting menu. Here is where you can add lights, change up your environment, and adjust your matte cap. I definitely recommend playing around with what matte cap works for you, because I think it does make a difference in how you perceive your sculpt, especially when you start painting it as well. Matte cap and lighting is pretty important to the overall feel and look that you want to give to your sculpture. Next we have quality and post-processing. I don't really fiddle around with this menu, so we're actually going to move on. And that brings us to the background menu. So here's where you can essentially do what it says, adjust the background. You can kind of, if you want to keep it on a gradient, you can change it to color or environment. I'm just showing you how that gradient feature would look, and you can kind of adjust the factor to see how your gradient bleeds into each other. And I think one of the most important features is definitely the reference image, which is what we will be using today. This definitely comes in handy when you want to essentially trace your design or like use it as a guide to help you form the sculpt. You can press transform and move the image about on your interface, shrink it, scale it to whatever size you want, and you can also adjust the opacity and overlay. So the opacity will affect the image, the overlay affects how opaque you want your sculpted object to be. Okay, and last but not least, we have the camera menu, and all I really know here, I don't fiddle with it too much, I just know that it's recommended to keep your camera view in orthographic. When I try to understand the difference between orthographic and perspective, it's all engineering jargon and talk that kind of goes over my head. So I'm not going to sit here and pretend to share with you the differences between the two. All I know is that it's recommended to keep it unorthographic. Okay, what else we got? We also have the nav sphere over in the top right hand corner. You can use that to kind of rotate around your object, so that comes in handy. And then over to the right are some of the common tools that I use, such as the clay tool, the move tool, the smooth tool. We've got the mask tool, which is really fun to work with. I sometimes use the flatten tool. We've got trim, and the split tool is also a common one that I used for this project, and tube. I'm just gonna briefly show you what some of these guys can do. Like, you just click the clay tool and you just start working your magic. And what it essentially does is just adds digital clay on top of your object. And over to the left, you can adjust the size of your brush. You can adjust the intensity and how intense you want it. And you can also subtract clay if you need to. So that also comes in handy as well. And if you ever mess up, all you gotta do is just tap 2 fingers to go back, or you can click the arrows in the bottom left-hand corner. All right, and so for the move tool, it essentially just makes it pretty quick and easy to kind of push and pull your clay in whatever shape or direction you need it to be. I used it heavily when tracing over my design. So it's like one of the first tools that I basically end up using for this project. Next, we have the smooth tool, which is exactly what it sounds. It just kind of smooths things out. And then next, which I think is probably my favorite tool, is the masking tool. I'm just surprised with what you can actually do, because sometimes there's shapes in your head that you can't really like sculpt, or you ask yourself, how am I going to sculpt that? Well, then you have the masking tool, and it's really good at extracting shapes from your sculpture when you need them. It's essentially a brush, and you just paint on whatever shape you need extracted. You can invert the mask, so that way the shape that you actually want to move is the one that gets manipulated. And yeah, it's just a really great tool. I am so grateful for it. Once you're happy with your mask, just press the clear button and it goes away. And let's say you mess up in your mask, there's also an unmask feature as well, which essentially just works like an eraser. Another tool that comes in handy is the trim tool. I use it when I need to basically cut off a piece of my sculpture for whatever reason. The default is set to lasso, but if you go over to the stroke options over here in the right, you can select however you want to trim your object. And my favorite option out of all these is the line stroke. I just like the precision that I get with the line stroke. And when I use it, I typically like to have the grid on, which by the way, you can access that at the bottom of your toolbar. And let's say you want to change the color of your grid. All you have to do is just double tap where it says grid, and a color box will show up for you. And you can adjust the grid lines to whatever color suits you. So once I have my trim tool out and ready, I'm just going to click on the grid where I want to cut my object, and then I release, and then the object's cut. The split tool is another handy dandy feature where if I need to cut something in half, I do essentially what I did when trimming it. And if you click on your scene menu, it will reveal that you now have two objects instead of just one, a top half and a bottom half. Another major tool that I should have talked about first actually is the gizmo. This essentially just lets you move and orient your object wherever you see fit. You can move it up and down, left to right. You can rotate it on the y-axis, x-axis. Try saying that 5 times fast. Scale it to whatever size you need it to be. It's just a really good tool to have in your arsenal. Okay, we finally made it through talking through some of the basics, but one more thing I need to talk about, I need to tell you guys about validating your object. So when you add a new object, it's going to be at its most primitive form. And if you want to continue to add details to it, sculpt more on top of it, subtract from it, you must always validate first. Validating the object essentially just converts the basic primitive object into a mesh that's easier to work with. Okay, I think we're all done with housekeeping. Let's go ahead and get started. So I'm starting off with adding my reference image. And so I'm just importing my design that we're going to use as a guide to get our sculpture started. And just a disclaimer, I am speeding up the video just a bit, just so it isn't as long. I'm hoping to keep this at least under 60 minutes, maybe shorter. And I think the only way to do that is to speed things up. So I hope you don't mind. So once I like the shape of my character's head, I need to trim the back of it so it lays flat on the fruit. So I'm taking my trim tool and I'm essentially just clipping the back of it. So that way it's no longer rounded and it has more of a flat surface. So I can easily place it on the back of the getup when I get ready to add that part in. And then once that section has been clipped, I'm just taking my move tool again and forming the profile of what I think my 3D toy or sculpture could potentially look like. To be honest, I'm kind of just eyeballing it. I never really thought too hard about, man, what would the side of this look like? But that's pretty important, you know, if you want to bring a flat image to life. So I'm kind of just fiddling around. Once I liked the shape of the head, I went ahead and changed the matte cap as well. And then what you're gonna see me do next is I'm gonna open up my scene menu and I'm gonna start naming my objects just to keep things better organized. Next, I've added a cylinder, and what I'm gonna do is I am going to use the cylinder to represent Sagu's ears. I also want to point out that when I added my cylinder, it came with like these lines and dots on it. So that's going to be the radius option that you see at the bottom of your cylinder toolbar. And what I did to adjust it to make it go from tall to short is I clicked on the tube tool on the left side of my screen, and you essentially can just like click dots and kind of move the dots up and down to adjust the height of the shape. And I want to point out that every time you add an object to your scene, you are met with options to adjust it before you validate. And in my case, I typically keep the settings the same other than post subdivisions. Post subdivision for certain objects, I like to adjust and bump up to whatever I see fit because it essentially rounds out some hard edges. Next, I'm just taking the gizmo tool and I'm just gonna go ahead and rotate it forward facing and adjust it and scale it down to the size I want Saga's ear to be. And I'm bringing up my reference image again to kind of overlay on top of it just to figure out placement. And I also wanted to mention, you'll probably see me throughout this video that I don't validate everything right away. I like to keep it as is until I'm officially ready to turn it into a mesh, because that means I'm ready to sculpt on top of it. Once I like the shape and placement of my ear, I'm gonna go ahead and click add. Under repeaters, add my mirror. And if you look in the scene menu, you can see that the cylinder is nested under the mirror, basically repeating the object on the other side. Next on the menu, I'm gonna go ahead and add Sagu's little hands, and I am keeping her hands so simple. They're just little spheres, nothing too crazy. And as I continue to add more to the sculpture, I'm continuously rotating it just to see what it could look like on the side view as well. And just like with the ears, I'm also adding a mirror feature to the hands as well, and naming my objects and mirrors appropriately, again, just to stay more organized. Okay, now that I have part of my sculpture created as simply as possible, I'm actually going to get ready to validate some of these objects because I'm going to enact the voxel remesh feature. And in order to use voxel remesh, you have to validate first. So I'm bumping up the resolution because I'm going to be masking parts of the face, and a high resolution helps with that. And I'm also going to be subtracting from the ears, and you'll see what I mean in just a little bit. Okay, I made some more minor adjustments, and I'm just adjusting the reference to fit the sculpt because those little black lines in the ear, I'm actually gonna subtract from the clay to kind of create like a concave. I think is it convex or concave? But I'm going to basically indent the ears a little bit just to give the figure more dimension. But I'm using the reference as a guide to see where I want to make those indentations. All right, I think the head is looking pretty good, and we're actually about to come up on my favorite part, which is the masking. So as you can see, I'm grabbing my masking tool and I'm turning the brush radius down as low as I can go. I believe it's 5 points, that's the minimum. And I'm just going to start masking over her hair. So when I thought of creating my character into like a little art toy or just like 3D sculpting in general, I always did wonder like, how am I gonna do the hair? What the heck is the hair gonna look like? But with the masking tool, I feel like it kind of takes away the guesswork. Essentially, all I have to do is trace the shape that I want. And then once that's all traced, I'm going to invert my mask and essentially extract the shape of the hair and pull it from my foundation. Like, I feel like I'm not explaining this well enough, but you will see what I mean in just a moment. It comes in handy. I've seen artists use it to create eyes, to extract clothes from their figures. It is a really powerful and versatile tool. Okay, I have the shape that I want, so I'm going to click invert and I'm going to extract the hair pretty soon. But first, I'm going to save my work. That is something I should have been mentioning this whole time. Please save your work. Nomad Sculpt does not automatically save like most art programs, so it's very important that you save your work periodically so you don't lose anything. So now that the mask has been inverted, I'm scrolling down to my move tool. And I'm just showing you like what I mean when I say I'm extracting the shape, but I typically like to use the gizmo. I think it's a little bit more uniform, and it just gives me a little bit more control on the depth or volume that I want to give this character. Hopefully I'm explaining that well enough, but yeah, as you can see, the move tool or the gizmo tool will do just fine. And this is exactly how I pictured my character's like hairstyle to look if she was ever turned 3D. So I'm really happy with this feature, and I'm again really liking how everything's looking. So I'm just gonna go ahead and smooth everything out. Again, that's why voxel remesh is also pretty important. The higher the resolution, I think the cleaner smoothing everything out will look. All right, and just like with the hair, the face was also kind of like a pressure point where I was like, how am I gonna sculpt that? But we're essentially gonna do the same thing. The mask tool comes in handy once again. Another thing to mention is the masking tool does come with some stroke features. And one of the features I'm utilizing for her face is the lazy rope stabilizer, which basically just allows a little bit more control when it comes to smoothing out your mask strokes. And because there's a lot of curves, like curved lines on my character's face, the rope stabilizer really comes in handy with making sure everything stays nice and smooth and circular instead of shaky. All right, once her face is nice and painted, I'm essentially going to do exactly what I did with the hair and invert the mask. And I'm going for my gizmo tool, and instead of extracting up, we are going to push the eyes back, keeping the depth a little bit more subtle. I'm just trying to imagine if I ever did have any of my designs 3D printed, how would the eyes look? Would I want to paint them on, or would I want them to be kind of like sculpted out where I could already see the face and I don't have to do a lot of guesswork and just like throwing paint on top of the figure? There's already indentations made in the face that allows me to paint where I need to. All right, now that the face is coming together, I'm just gonna go ahead and bring back the hands, and we're gonna start adding more details pretty soon. So the next item we're going to construct is the Genup costume itself, and I'm just using a sphere for that one. I accidentally added it to an object that already had a mirror, so I had to just put it on its own. But yeah, we are essentially going to form the Genup costume with just a sphere. And right now what you're seeing is I'm just kind of lining up the sphere with the head and kind of trying to figure out how is this head going to fit flat on the sphere. And what I essentially just ended up doing is I just ended up cutting into the sphere with the trim tool. I probably don't need to do all of this. This was, again, just my head thinking like, what would this look like if this was printed in 3D? How would the head sit on top of the Genup costume? It's very round. Like, I think I need to create like a flat surface for the head to sit on. So just trying to get my like head gears turning and really trying to think what this object could look like in my hand versus on a computer screen. Also, another nifty feature that comes in handy is the X-ray tool located in the bottom left toolbar on the screen. So right now my sphere has the X-ray feature applied to it, so that way I can, as I line up the head with it, I can kind of see where in the sphere I want to cut into. Okay, so we're gonna start sculpting the Genup, and so one thing I noticed, I haven't seen Genup in a really long time, and when I was creating my little sticker design, I was kind of just going based off of memory, which shame on me. As an artist, we should always be using references, but I was going based off of memory, and I kind of just made my Genup look more like an apple than a Spanish lime. Like, it really does kind of look a little bit like a mini lime, but the way I had it or designed it, it looks more like an apple, like a traditional apple with a stem poking out of it. And I was like, oh man, that's not right at all. I mean, I still like it. It's still cute. Unfortunately though, I did get it printed already, so there's no going back now. But I'm like, okay, well, for this sculpt, we're gonna actually pull up a reference image of the Genup and take it from there. Again, for this part of the sculpture, I'm pulling out my move tool and just kind of pushing and pulling the sphere into the shape that I think matches the reference image better. Actually, I ended up backtracking and I realized I wanted to split my sphere in half before I started sculpting out the shape of it, so that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, so slight hiccup. This, as you can see, this sculpture looks a little different than what I was showing you all previously, and that is because I did not film myself doing footage of creating Sagu's legs. However, thankfully, I have done this sculpture at least 4 times, and I filmed it for like 4 different times. So I'm just gonna use backup footage to show you all how I did her limbs. Like, essentially, I'm just gonna focus on her legs. As you can see, her arms are there too, but the concept is still the same. When creating her arms and legs, the star of the show is going to be your tube tool over to the right. And once that's highlighted, you're going to want to hover over to the left side of your panel, and you see that there are 2 options, curve and path. That's going to be what helps you draw out your lines. So I'm going to use the path option for this, and I'm just going to start clicking and dragging to create her legs. So once you've drawn out your line and you're pretty happy with the placement, all you have to do next is click that green dot, and it essentially gives your line shape. And those dots are going to be very useful in moving your tube object. You can pull the orange dots to kind of taper the legs. So I'm kind of having one end really narrow, the other end's a little bit wider. I also want to point out in this backup video too, as you can see, I already had the mirror feature applied, so that's why you're seeing 2 legs instead of just 1. I'm actually really glad I have this backup footage because after resculpting this 4 times, I don't know if I could have gone for a 5th, if I'm being honest. But I do miss the like cool reddish brown map cap, to be honest. I'm not sure if I like the white. Okay, we're back. I'm using the original footage, not the backup footage now. And this time, so at this point, the legs have already been made along with the arms. Now we are going to sculpt her little shoes. And to do that, I am just using a cylinder and a sphere. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to combine them. I'm going to validate them, then voxel remesh them, bump up the resolution, and then I'm going to trim them in half to form her shoes. And who knows, there may have been an easier way to shape her shoes. This is just the method that worked best for me. And, you know, like they say, there's no one right way to do something. There's probably a different way to do this, probably an easier way. But again, you just have to figure out what works for you. So now that I have the shoe made, I'm just gonna go ahead and grab my gizmo tool to kind of reorient the shoe in the position that I want it. Okay, I promise we are actually almost finished. There are a few more tweaks that I need to make, such as, so since the getup itself was made out of a sphere, it still has a rounded bottom, as you can see. So what I'm gonna work on next is essentially trimming that bottom down, so that if, again, trying to think as if this was a real life printed figure, I'd like it to sit totally and completely flat on a table. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring out my trim tool again to essentially make that happen. Okay, we fast forward because again, I forgot to film, or at least, I don't know, I thought I was filming, but I guess I wasn't. But as you can see, not only did I trim the sphere, but I trimmed Sagu's legs as well and the shoes. Because again, I would like the entire figure to kind of sit flat. You're not gonna get everything, so if that happens, you just kind of have to go in and clean things up a bit. All right, and she is still looking really nice. It's pretty cool to see everything kind of come together. One thing that I also have missing footage of is how I sculpted the getup, how I was able to kind of create the tears in it, similar to what you see in the photo. So I'm gonna see if I have backup footage of that and insert it here. Be right back. Okay, so if you're seeing this footage, it means that I did not have any backup footage of me sculpting the getup. So I'm just gonna quickly demonstrate to you all exactly what I did. I started off with a sphere, as mentioned earlier. I validated my object and then voxel remeshed it. And next I went and found the split tool, and we're going to essentially divide up the sphere into 2 hemispheres. So I'll have a top half and a bottom half to work with, and we're just going to be working with the top half for right now. And and I'm also going to choose the matte cap because I just think the clay looking one is a little bit easier on the eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the top half of my sphere, and we're also going to isolate it so we can just focus on shaping it. And how I do that is there is a feature at the bottom of the toolbar called Solo. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that, and it basically hides everything in your scene and only focuses on the object that you have selected. Next, I'm going to grab my move tool, and to kind of create those little tears in the getup, I'm just going to bring my move tool over to the edge of my object, make sure symmetry is turned on, and I'm going to just kind of bring them down a bit, again, to kind of like match the tears in the design. And I just did that all around as best as I could. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be exact if you don't want it to be. And as mentioned earlier, there's a million and one ways to do the same thing. This is just what seemed easiest and simpler for me to apply. And as you can see right now, my polygons are showing, so I'm gonna bump up the resolution a little bit more and then smooth everything out. But yeah, that is essentially how I got the shape of the getup costume. I just wish that I had the original footage. So I hope this quick little demonstration can hopefully suffice for you guys. I do feel like though, if I ever did get this 3D printed, I couldn't leave this as it is. I think I would have to hollow out the shape. Or maybe I could print it like this, but I think hollowing out your prints is actually more efficient money-wise and material-wise. I guess money and material kind of go hand in hand, but I think you understand what I'm saying. Oh, and right now I am using the flatten tool. I did use this on all 4 iterations. I just wanted to apply it to the edges to kind of give it a little bit more depth or detail. I just thought it looked nice, if I'm being honest. Okay, now that that quick demonstration is done, we're gonna go back to the original video. All right, before I get to coloring, there's one more little detail that I want to add, and that is the stem on top of the getup. So I'm gonna use the tube tool to kind of shape it in the way that I like, and then we're going to watch it all come together. And for this portion, I also wanted to get the curves as close to the original design as possible. So I'm just rearranging my reference image on top of my sculpt to kind of trace over it. And again, just messing with the settings, the primitive settings. Again, I like to bump up my post subdivision because it makes my primitive shapes a little bit more rounded. I also want to add, you want to mess with the primitive settings first before you validate. So just be sure you're happy with what you have, because once you validate, you can't revert back. The only way to revert back is to essentially delete the object and start from scratch. So at this point, I went to my scene menu and I cloned the second or the upper part of the stem. So I just cloned that part, and I'm going to kind of shape it, move it around, adjust it to fit how I like. And then after that, once I'm satisfied with the placement, we're going to add the leaf. To create the leaf, I'm just going to use a sphere, and then I'm going to grab my gizmo tool and adjust the width on the Z axis. So now it's a little bit more narrow, and I'm going to do the same thing with the red dot being the X axis. And once I'm happy with the shape, I'm just rotating it, and I'm going to place it on top of the stem, or not on top, but connect it with the stem. Oh my gosh, this is turning into the worst tutorial ever because I don't have footage of me sculpting my leaf. And I like my leaf. I think the leaf turned it, oh my gosh. I think the leaf turned out pretty okay. So I'm really sorry I don't have footage of that, but Again, I will at least show you an example, a very rough example, I should mention, of how I essentially sculpted that leaf. So bear with me, I'm gonna go ahead and insert an example clip shortly. So after I had my leaf sculpted in its basic shape, I brought my reference image back up and I continued to pull using the move tool and the gizmo. I continued to manipulate my shape to kind of fit the contour of the image. The shape isn't going to be exact at this point. In order to get it a little bit more precise, we're going to go ahead and bring out the trim tool, and this time we're going to leave it on lasso instead of line. And as you can see, I didn't realize that I had the flip feature turned on, highlighted in red over to the left. And as I was trying to trim out my shape, I was like, why is it acting like this? And then I noticed, oh, I have to uncheck the flip feature. So I kind of was just messing around with it, kind of confused on what was going on, checking my settings, like, I have it on lasso, what's going on? And then I realized, yeah, I just have to flip that setting off. So maybe it was a good thing that I had to do this little example, because then it showed you what you could potentially run into and how to fix it. So now that I realized that I just needed to flip my lasso, I'm cutting out the shape of the leaf. And from what I can remember, I wasn't too hyper-focused on precision. I just wanted to cut it enough to where it matched as best as possible because, of course, I was going to clean this all up later. And then right now I'm just cleaning things up by smoothing them out, using the move tool to kind of like reposition it, and also using the flatten tool to kind of get rid of like some pointier features that I just didn't like. And then once I was done with that, I brought my reference image up again and repositioned the leaf once more to, again, just get it the way that I wanted it. I know I said you don't have to be super hyper-focused, but I think there was a part of me that was a little obsessed with some of the details. I think I just essentially wanted to reenact how I recreated it the fourth time as best as possible. Okay, and once I was happy with the shape yet again, I brought out my clay tool and had it set to sub so we can kind of carve out into the leaf and just adding that little extra detail. And once I was happy with how the carving looked, that's when I brought out the smooth brush again to smooth everything out. Okay, I know I said the stem was going to be the last feature, but we have one more minor item to add, and that is going to be the platform that Sawgoose sits on. But of course, in the style of this tutorial, I don't have footage of that, so I'm going to quickly demonstrate how I created Sawgoose's little flower pedestal. Yeah, so hang tight. Okay, I'm going to be super quick with this demonstration. So to create the little flower platform, I just inserted a cylinder. I'm clicking my tube tool to shrink the cylinder down. I'm upping my post subdivision in the primitive settings to round it out a bit. Once I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and select validate. Next, we're going to click on our scene menu and then click add. We're going to select radial, and in the radial settings where it says radial Y, we're going to bump that from 4 to 5. And then go back to our scene, make sure cylinder is selected, and then we're gonna tug on the red arrow. Once we click that red arrow, we're gonna drag out our cylinder, and voila, you get multiple cylinders that form the shape of a flower. And that's the radial tool in a nutshell. It's really useful, especially when creating flowers. You can have a lot of fun with it, play around with the rotation, the orientation of it. It's a really versatile tool. I like it a lot. All right, we finally made it. Little Sawgoo is all sculpted out. So in this next set of footage that I'm currently showing, I'm kind of just speeding up some of the tweaks and other minor adjustments I made, just because if I talk about every little thing, this is going to be a very, very long video. And I still have to get to coloring, but as you can see, I'm kind of adding like some texture elements to the getup. It's not totally necessary, especially considering how simple and basic my character already is, but it was just a nice touch I wanted to add. All right, and after tweaking a few things, adding in a couple of minor other details, my little sagu is ready to be digitally painted. However, as I am recording this, we are at the 50-minute mark, and I just think that the coloring aspect of this video just needs to be a two-parter. So I do apologize, but I do think it's best with the interest of time. I don't know what I'm trying to say. I think it would just be easier on everybody if I just split this up into a two-part video. However, that footage is already prepared and made, so it shouldn't take me too long to upload part 2. So I hope you will stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, this does conclude the sculpting aspect of the tutorial. If you stayed here this long, thank you so much. You are a trooper. I really appreciate the patience, especially since I know that I don't have an extensive knowledge of the application, and I know that this tutorial was, again, very informal and could have been a little bit more structured. But as I kind of, dive into this journey, I'm hoping that just comes along with more practice, and maybe one day, if you all are interested and I actually do get better at sculpting and hopefully one day producing my own little toy, I can give you all a more proper and structured tutorial. But again, that's going to be it for today. Stick around, like and subscribe if you want to see how the rest of my art journey unfolds. I do have more shop updates coming, I promise. Unfortunately, a date still hasn't been announced, but I am continuously working behind the scenes to make sure that when I am ready to open, that I'll have products that you all will actually enjoy. So again, stay tuned for updates. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and I will see you all next time. Bye.